What are my favorite GameCube games? Double Dash, Sonic Heroes, Mario Sunshine. Both Sonic Adventure remakes of those count as, like, I guess GameCube games and ports, but sure, whatever. Melee? like, duh, Melee. Paper Mario Thousand Year Door, Twilight Princess. The debate about, like, your favorite GameCube titles is kind of like not the most productive to me, because, like, I think we can all agree there's an absolute shit ton of bangers on GameCube. It's more like you wish, I don't know, you could play them on the Switch, honestly, I would say. The early 2000s is kind of that, like, it's the bliss point. It's where game budgets weren't bloated to shit and back due to, I guess, like, the utilization of modern hardware, of you know, computational stuff. It's like a bliss point of, like, compromise due to limitations and game budgets not being blown out of control here. So you felt like you actually had to kind of, like, well, I can't just make everything pretty, so I have to have some kind of gameplay substance to what I'm doing and saying, and that's the difference there. That's why there's, like, such an abundant amount of games that are just, like, really good then, and there's so many fewer, I would say, now. Actually, it kind of applies to a similar parallel to Hollywood. 10 years ago, or even 20 years ago, you saw a lot of the Hollywood stuff was like a mid-budget, and you had to kind of, like, really, it was risky to go for the massive budget thing, you know? You could make a $50 million film or $100 million film, and it would, like, typically, you know, that would be like the general implied cap on, like, risk X reward for any kind of cinematic endeavor. And now it's like everything has got to be a property or an IP-based property, building a sequel universe or an expanded universe, minimize risk, appeal to China, appeal nationwide, have, you know, cross-gender appeal. So no matter how girly and lame it is, it's got to have, like, a battle in there at some point, even if it doesn't demand it. The idea that you either, like, go all in for max safety and calculation, or you have to, like, kind of keep it really modest and tame by comparison. The idea of, like, a mid-tier budget film or mid-tier ambition is kind of, like, dissolving. And even, like, Fox Searchlight, which was acquired by Disney, and it's probably gonna get shut down now, is also kind of like another shame that's happening here. So yeah, and now that Hollywood model can be reflected in parallel with gaming now, because due to, like, the hardware being restrained by, I don't know, like, what a PS2 could do, or a GameCube, or an Xbox original, it's like, well, we can't go any further. The hardware's already tapped here. So, you know, despite how much you may have wanted Okami or Shadow of the Colossus to look any better, despite how much you may have wanted Gran Turismo 4 to look a little bit better, the hardware, you're capped by it. So now, like, you have your concept, you've reached your throttle on visual appeal, visual fidelity, whatever you want to call it, that now you have all these compromises that make you have to, like, really reinforce and think about conceptually what you want your game to be and do. So that gameplay is king. The aesthetic and the experience of the game weren't as much of a focus here now, which could be an implied, you know, jab at Death Stranding, which I feel is going for more of an experience than, say, any direct gameplay. No, that's a wrong thing, but I feel like there's a symptom here of a lot of games doing that now. And again, we're kind of at this whole point where it's like AAA goes for, like, this really big thing, and then, like, you either buy AAA or you buy indie, and there's very few in between now, just like in Hollywood. So that's why I'm particularly nostalgic towards 2000s. You know, you're not going to get a game like GTA 3 or even like Vice City now, because, you know, those properties have moved on, and now you're going to get this, like, you know, Colossus shaped, you know, GTA 5 and onward. You don't get the stuff like that anymore, I would say. So again, I know it's a lot for me to say all that and not be gross in my oversimplification of my over categorization of the general trends of game development over the last 20 years. But I still think it's still a topical enough thing, and you can get where I'm getting at here. You can observe where games were compared to where they are now. Could Death Stranding have been a better game if there was something to restrain some of Kojima's ideas? Well, if I'm allowed to just give you a little more elaboration on what I'm talking about here. What I mean by that, the evidence to me is very apparent in our 7th generation of gaming. 360, PS3, and the Wii. Well, to lesser extent the Wii, obviously, but, like, you know, whereas before standards were like at a certain point, it's definitely the era of compromise and introduced that in my opinion, where like I'm looking at a lot of games that would opt for 30 FPS over 60 and be okay with that because their ideas justified X, but the hardware couldn't handle Y, and they went for the compromise of performance or the gameplay for the aesthetic. DMC 2012 remake comes to mind. Borderlands 1 comes to mind. You know, the idea of rather than having scripted events, there's more like dynamic AI utilization, and typically things once like these take a hit to performance because of the comically limited amount of memory that a PS3 and Xbox 360 had. You know, if they're half a gig of memory, made it really hard. I would think by like 2010, it was just so comically apparent that these console shaped lunch boxes were just chugging and out of memory, dude. Like I recall quite a few games at that time were just like, you couldn't do much because you were just so throttled on the RAM, if I recall correctly. Post 2010 went downhill when they realized they could fill games with microtransactions. There's so much to dive into there. The rise of DLC, the fragmentation of the complete game, the rise of the day one patch, the introduction of on-disc DLC, the rise of loot boxes, what's soon to be the birth of dynamic matchmaking in exploitative predatory manners by Activision's patent. Believe it or not, all these things didn't really exist before. Like none of them existed before 2005 for sure. Pre-05, it was expansion packs on PC. It was not any of this shit that you see now. The decline of multiplayer, or split screen, I should say, you know, because you can just sell 2 copies rather than 1. And also, again, compromise, you know, getting multiple inputs to run simultaneously. Fuck that, dude. Why would I let split screen happen? Even like just from like a corporate standpoint, it's like split screen, that shit's whack. That requires hella R&D to optimize the hardware to have double the people doing shit at one time. 1, 2, why give them that when we can just sell 2 copies and make both them fuckboys buy 2 copies of Halo 3.5 rather than have split screen on Halo 3. Yeah, Halo did have split screen. I was just trying to use an example of like, I can't recall the last game. Let me think here. Like, the last games I've played that had split screen: Mario Kart 8, MotorStorm, and Halo 3. And that's me digging back 10 years right now. Thoughts on games cost of $60 being the same since forever? There's often parallels applied here between movie tickets and games, or even other forms of mediums like books. Whereas I feel like it's expected that a new book is 20 bucks and people are okay with that. And then people will use this like, and the problem is it goes back to this whole thing about like the customer perception of value is very different than the justification of development costs to a developer or publisher. Those are like, they're at war with one another, and you gotta find the happy medium where the customer's willing to pay and the publisher's willing to develop the game and release it at those prices. The problem where it all gets fucking stupid is that you have this pretty sizable chunk of gamers who advocate that a game has to be a certain length to be worth 60 bucks. I saw it so often at GameStop. It was so fucking toxic. They would opt to play bloated Ubisoft Tower game 55 because it had 60 hours of shit to do, then say by comparison give a very phenomenal 10 to 20 hour experience of Uncharted 2 a chance. You know, I had people who would like, when I would describe, you know, the concept of Shadow of the Colossus and how it's like, you know, it's you know, you go to tackle, I don't know, whatever it is, 13 bosses, and all of them are very tricky and take a very long time to figure out and do. And the vastness of that land is like meant to be something totally different. And you're like, yeah, I'm just gonna, you know, fuck that, I'm gonna play Burnout then. Like my description of like what it was turned them off from trying it out. And I was like, oh, okay, well, fuck, I shouldn't have said that then. There was a lot of that made me a little bit sad. In terms of like pursuing the games you want to try it or whatever. But yeah, there's a lot of that going on here, and the $60 price tag for gaming is like, I don't know, man. Like, I don't know. 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 Like, I don't know I don't like it because I don't think all games can fit in that perception of valuation and work out fine. For example, I think one of the major reasons that Celeste did so well is it was 20 bucks. The reluctance you may have to play that game because it looks a certain way because it's another pixel art indie or whatever, like you completely get past that barrier because it's 20 bucks. And you're like, okay, I'll try it out. If the developer of that game was acquired by a bigger publisher and they were mandated through the publisher bloat or whatever you want to call it, that process to, you know, like in some kind of way, use more money so that you were able to justify selling it for 40 rather than 20. You know, I'm not sure how that would have worked. Or even, you know, Cadence of Hyrule, you know, it's 30 rather than 20. I wonder how much better would have sold more at 20 rather than 30, and would that loss of 10 bucks been compensated by the sheer volume, it would have sold more at an appealing price point. I don't know, I can't say. I don't have like the insight here to tell you more about that here. But I do see a comical amount of games be at 60 bucks flat that I feel like shouldn't be at 60, don't have to be at 60, but because of like, I don't know, the complicated gridlock of our modern gaming infrastructure, oftentimes you're kind of like stuck at that point. And I've seen it from GameStop too, dude. I've seen people literally who like look at the price of a game and be like, oh, if it's cheaper, it must suck ass. And like they get put in that box of thinking, and it's kind of why, well, when you get shitted on like that, I mean, that's probably why they don't, you know, that tells the publisher and developer, okay, well, you want to meet the apex of like, you know, of return on investment, make it a $60 game. Don't make a cheaper game for a limited niche experience at a lower price point to reflect the smaller audience potential here. No, bloat it out and make it as broad as possible so it hits that $60 threshold in valuation perception by customers, and then we'll sell more copies at that point. It's complicated, y'all. It's really, really complicated to bring up the $60 price point thing. I wish more games could flourish successfully outside that bubble. But with all that aside, let's go back to the core question here. What do I think of $60 games being 60 bucks for so long now? As in, do I think the games are due to increase in price because they've been at 60 for quite a while now? Shit happens, inflation happens, they're probably overdue to have another price increase of, you know, debatably 70 bucks or whatever. We haven't had a price increase since 2005, right? So yeah, it's been, believe it or not, it's been almost 15 years. This actually, we're in November now. It has been 15 years. We've been at that point. It's one of those questions to ask here, you know, when you really think about it, you know, what games used to cost back during cartridge manufacturing, then when they dropped, it's a reflection of a stabilization of the CD-ROM technology. And then when they went up, understandably, because of the, you know, I guess the next generation, where are we now? I can't say it would be the end of the world if games went up another 10 bucks. But I guess the problem is there's so much dishonesty in the AAA gaming industry by associated guilty parties like Activision, Blizzard, EA, Ubisoft, etc. All the guilty people of just like doing that toxic fragmentation of a game that it's like, I don't mind paying 60. Shit, I probably wouldn't even mind paying 70 given how far we've gotten with the whole like $60 price point now for a game, if the game was still what the game was back in 05 when this price hike happened. The problem is now, Bethesda included here big time, is that games now, and some of their worst toxic instances here are, you know, day one with a day one patch, buggy, a roadmap to a competent product, No Man's Sky, fragmentation out the wazoo, pre-announced. Remember back when you used to get mad about the idea that a season pass was there? They would openly announce the DLC coming out within a month of the game being released, and it's like, oh, so this was in development, so you were developing this while you're developing the game. That used to make you mad, right? Like Street Fighter 4 having on this DLC used to get you mad. You know, all like 15 bucks for 3 maps used to get you mad, like back in Modern Warfare 2. So many of these things have become standard now. And it's like, and that's what's hard to swallow with a price increase. If things were a little more transparent and honest in the evaluation that we've expected in the decade prior, I think it wouldn't be as big of a deal. But the problem is now that's not the case. And for that reason, $70 games would probably irk me because we're essentially already living at that time with when you see some of the shit that like Activision pulls at the Call of Duty release, where if you recall here, I forget which Call of Duty it was, whether it was last year or the year before, where you had to get the $120 edition to get the bundled Modern Warfare 1 remaster that everybody wanted. They like made it in a way where it was like, yeah, if you don't get the $120 version, you're fucking yourself over. So they essentially manufactured a way to give you a massive price hike. They pulled the apple. They pulled the apple on you, where like, yeah, the new iPhone, it's, you know, it's awesome. Starts at, hypothetically here, $650, right? And it's a 16 gig version. And then the next version up for $750 is quad the storage to make the entry model so comically invaluable that you feel like an idiot if you don't get the higher end one. So it's like, yeah, you can get Call of Duty for $60. I mean, but for, you know, for 100, you get the duty points, you get the other shit, you get the gun that can fuck everyone up no problem, you know, easy peasy. But for 120, you get the whole other, you get the Modern Warfare 1 and all the other shit, and you know. So, and then it gets even more complicated when you bring into play the free to play shit, because then fuck, that makes when you add in mobile gaming and free to play and the free to play monetization and all the other shit, that makes the whole, forget everything I said here, dude. That makes the whole other model seem archaic by comparison. The whole thing is so complicated. And the sad part is, y'all, we're not even, all this bitching right now about traditional core gaming, we're no longer the elephants in the room anymore. You know, like mobile gaming is way more where all the money is. If you're a game developer, where the money at? Mobile gaming. Is it cutthroat as fuck? Absolutely. But for those who make it, bank. So yeah, the casual market is, dude, they're dumber, they're more exploitable. You can take advantage of their gambling tendencies, and just it's gambling and mental manipulation, and it's right up your alley. So I don't know, y'all, it's complicated. We have to like go into like a formal, I guess, like direction of conversation if I want to enter that realm, but I think I've done my best to answer the $6 price point. So holy fucking shit. Okay.